and many of you know this story well. So I'll get to that in a minute, but first I'd like to call your attention to a story you may not know so well. Father Mark graciously invited me to come and talk about a program that I'm involved with. The Friends of Tamar is an organization that seeks to support women who've experienced sexual violence in all its forms, including but not limited to sexual assaults and domestic violence. So let's talk for a minute about who is this Tamar and what's up with her friends. This is the Tamar from the story in 2 Samuel. It's the story known as the rape of Tamar. Tamar was a beautiful princess, the daughter of powerful King David. So the violence that we're talking about can happen to somebody who's from enormous privilege or poverty. It can happen in a rural setting or an urban setting and everything in between. After her rape, she's forced to leave her home. And the passage ends with Tamar, a broken woman. Then, in the aftermath of the violence she experienced, in the depths of her isolation and desolation, the crime becomes invisible. We don't hear any more about Tamar. And in too many ways, for far too long, I fear that in churches we continue that invisibility. We don't talk about Tamar at church. Her passage isn't something that we read on Sundays, and most of us don't even learn about her at any point. And when it is raised to us, we kind of fidget in our seats, we get uncomfortable. These are the kind of things that we don't like to talk about or even think about, because it reminds us of the very worst things that human beings can do to one another. Biblical scholars call this passage one of the texts of terror. And terror is exactly what people who experience such violence go through. But our silence as a faith community leaves survivors alone in that darkness, at a time when they most need to be reminded that God loves them and we, the community, stand beside them in helping them to move forward with their lives. I know well the inner destructive force of that darkness because I am a Tamar. 20 years ago, almost 21, I was a brand new congressional staffer, just a few weeks on the job in Washington, D.C. And on a very cold February night, I was walking home from work. The Capitol dome was still lit in all its beautiful glory, and I was less than a block from the front door of my apartment building when I was accosted at gunpoint by a stranger, drug into an alley, severely beaten, raped, and unconscious. I was left for dead. Now let me first share some good news with you. The good news is that I survived, so I'm one of the lucky ones, and the first good Samaritan to help me, I found out just in the last year, was an Episcopalian. I was not an Episcopalian then. I turned to the church that I had been raised in, and they were not able, could not, would not help me with the grief that I was experiencing. So as I struggled to move beyond that grief, I became conditioned that there had to be a separation of that immense pain that I was experiencing from my church life. Even my church life. Several aspects of my life, but even my church life as well. St. Theresa of Avila, great name, St. Theresa, wrote a book called Interior Castles. And in that book, she talks about the many rooms of our interior lives, of our faith journey. And she describes how the strife that we experience as we go through life is much like passing through different rooms in a mansion. For me, for far too long, the door to pass through the room that involved my rape was locked. I didn't have a means to process it as part of my faith journey. So I tried to clean up that room as best I could, kind of the way that you quickly clean a room when unexpected company is arriving. One of my friends calls it cleaning under threat of invasion. But I knew that in the darkness in that room, all of that despair that I experienced was still lurking, and I was afraid at some point it was going to pop out again and get me. All that changed in 2012 when I began attending services at Trinity Cathedral. There, I found the spiritual home where I could present myself in all my brokenness to Christ, with the community surrounding me and helping me regain my faith through them. There, I healed and I unlocked that sealed door so that I can move forward in my interior castle, deepen my faith, and grow my relationship with God. Their love helped me to make my own text of terror holy. Together, we formed the Friends of Tamar. It's an outreach ministry that we launched in Omaha to write a redemptive ending to the Tamar story for those who are hurting in our community. And today I'm here as a Tamar and as a friend of Tamar to call on all of you to join us in this journey so that we can help as many of our sisters in the Diocese of Nebraska as possible. We'll have a chance to talk about some more specific ways you can get involved after Mass, but here's what I want you to know now. The premise of this ministry is that we can combat the violence in our world by sharing our love and our friendship with those who are hurt by it. And by talking with our friends, our coworkers, our neighbors, our other contacts, we can begin a conversation that's going to raise awareness about sexual assaults and domestic violence. And that is a crucial first step in challenging the culture of violence that surrounds too many of our communities. In Douglas County, the organization the program that helps women who have survived violence is called the Women's Center for Advancement. Here it's called Doves, and I'm so grateful that somebody from Doves is with us, and she'll be with us to talk after Mass too. In Douglas County, the Women's Center estimates 1 out of 3 women will experience this violence in their lifetime. 1 out of 3. So, a little over a year ago, we began our biggest project to date, the Suitcase Project. For some women who experience extreme violence, they find themselves in the immediate aftermath as Tamar did, as I did. When I was released from the hospital, we were unable to return to our homes, not to the homes we knew, and without so much as a toothbrush to begin our new lives, there we were. So what we do with the Suitcase Project is we deliver bags that are packed with about 3 days of supplies to these women and their children in those cases. We refer to those bags as rays of hope. And what we found is that once we started collecting items at the church, many women in our church, but also women from outside the church who came to the church to start to check this out, who had never shared their stories before, even to their family or friends, they finally felt like they could do so. They knew that now they could help to make something positive happen from their grief, and they started to step out of the shadows and share what happened to them. Lots of healing has begun with a simple gesture. You have the tools for this ministry already. It requires nothing more than a cup of coffee. I know you have that here. I already enjoyed some. The willingness to engage in some holy listening, which we're going to do when we talk to Doves about what could we best do to serve them. And the wonderful and warm smiles that I've already seen from all of you since I arrived here this morning. That's all it takes. There are so many ways to get involved. There's a role for everyone. And I assure you that there's tremendous need. So I hope you'll consider joining us in the journey. Together, through faith and friendship, we're transforming darkness and despair into sunlight and hope. Now, how does this tie to today's gospel reading, and what does a bunch of people drinking wine in Cana have to do with all this? In a word, everything. Here's what happened. Mary presented a problem to Jesus. She trusted. She took this problem to him, and it's much like when we take our problems to him, sometimes we can't wrap our minds around what the solution may be. Mary may not have had any idea either, but she trusted that if she told Jesus there was a problem, that he would be able to answer that problem. So she told the servants an important message. It resonates for us today. Do whatever he tells you. He didn't give them directives that were more than they could handle. He didn't ask them to do anything more complicated than fill water jugs. But he did ask them to take action. Jesus was able to miraculously transform water into wine, not just any wine, the best wine. This was his first sign, but not his last. John tells us this revealed his glory, and the disciples believed in him. Importantly, a transformation involving wine is a significant aspect of what we'll celebrate together in a few minutes. During the Eucharistic prayer, as we remember Jesus' faithful witness, the violence he endured because of it, his immense suffering, and even death, we all have the chance today to turn to him with our problems, with our brokenness, with our suffering, with complete trust, just as Mary did. We can put all of our brokenness on the altar table together as a community with Jesus. And here, his miraculous power endures for us. Because when we trust him like Mary did, our problems and our brokenness are never the end of the story. As Christians, when we celebrate the Eucharist together, we also celebrate Jesus' victory over sin, suffering, and even death. And by his resurrection, we can join together in his kingdom, not of this world. He prepared a kingdom for us that's not bound by earthly powers and entrapments, and it's not limited by human pain and suffering, but it's filled with the most amazing, life-giving gifts of hope and healing, of forgiveness and friendship, of peace and love. Thank you for letting me share in all these gifts of God with you today. Amen.